Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, and with me is Renu Kataria, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. India says reference made to New Delhi at OIC meet in Pakistan based on falsehoods and misrepresentation. Ministry of External Affairs says India will continue to partner with Arab countries in efforts to achieve regional peace, stability and prosperity. New Delhi once again calls for immediate cessation of violence to end Ukraine crisis. Says there is no other way to resolve it other than diplomacy. NATO leaders agreed to deploy 4 new battle groups to Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Bulgaria to counter Russian military operation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrives in New Delhi, likely to hold talks with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on Friday. North Korea test-fires suspected ballistic missile. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida terms it as an unforgivable recklessness. India ranks third among global ecosystems, says Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. 90 startups in India attain unicorn status. And in cricket, 15th edition of Indian Premier League Tata IPL 2022 to begin on Saturday. As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated, wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. Now the news in detail. India has said that the statements and resolutions adopted in the meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Pakistan demonstrates both the irrelevance of the OIC as a body and role of Pakistan as its manipulator. Replying to media queries on references to India in the statements and resolutions adopted in the OIC meeting, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi in New Delhi said references have been made to India that are based on falsehoods and misrepresentation. Mr. Bagchi stated that the absurdity of this body commenting on the treatment of minorities, that too at the instance of a serial violator of human rights like Pakistan, is evident. The spokesperson added that nations and governments that associate themselves with such exercises should realize the impact it has on their reputation. Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla has expressed India's steadfast support for a closer, meaningful and sustained cooperation between the United Nations and the League of Arab States for the benefit of the region. He was speaking at the UNSC briefing on cooperation between the UN and regional and sub-regional organizations on Wednesday. He said India will continue to partner with Arab countries in their efforts to achieve regional peace, stability and prosperity. The Foreign Secretary said India and the Arab world share a civilizational relationship underpinned by strong people-to-people relations and commercial and cultural ties. Trade between India and the Arab region through the Indian Ocean had flourished for several centuries even before the advent of modern commerce. Today, countries from the Arab world are host to more than 9 million Indians.
Amidst Ukraine crisis, India on Thursday asserted that its foreign policies are guided by its own thinking, views and interests. New Delhi once again called for immediate cessation of violence, adding that there is no other way than to return to dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the crisis. This was stated by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar while replying to supplementaries in the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of Parliament, during the question hour. The minister said New Delhi is in touch with the leadership of Ukraine and Russia, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to the presidents of both the countries. Dr. Jaishankar added that there is no question of linking Ukraine situation to trade issues. On the oil trade with Russia, he said, the government is examining various aspects including payments due to the emerging challenges with regard to dealing with Russia. He clarified that India imports less than 1% of its oil requirements from Russia. On a question about growing Russia-China relationship, he said the government is fully cognizant of all changes which are happening in international relations, including between Russia and China. The NATO says the military alliance is stepping up its defenses against chemical and nuclear weapons as concerns mounts that Russia might use such weapons in Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg told reporters after meeting in Brussels that alliance leaders agreed at the NATO summit on Thursday to send equipment to Ukraine to help protect it against a chemical weapons attack. This could include detection equipment, protection and medical support, as well as training for decontamination and crisis management. But Stoltenberg says the 30 NATO allies are boosting their own preparedness and readiness. The leaders also agreed to deploy 4 new battle groups, which usually number from 1,000 to 1,500 troops to Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Bulgaria. 4 other battle groups are stationed in the Baltic states and Poland.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has pleaded with the NATO to provide his embattled nation with military assistance. In a video address to the NATO summit on Thursday, he said Ukraine needs more than adequate military assistance as Russia is using its entire arsenal against the country. Mr. Zelensky said that Ukraine is also in dire need of multiple launch rocket systems, anti-ship weapons and air defense systems to survive in such a long-drawn war. He reminded the NATO leaders that thousands of Ukrainians have killed in the past month and 10 million people have left their homes. According to a senior Biden administration official, Zelensky did not reiterate his request for a no-fly zone or ask to join the NATO. The Czech Republic's parliament has approved a plan to deploy up to 650 Czech service members to Slovakia as a part of a multinational NATO force setup in response to Russia's military operation of Ukraine. Parliament's lower house approved the deployment Thursday after the upper house gave the green light last week. The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Poland and Slovenia will also contribute troops to the unit, expected to include up to 2,100 soldiers. The plan is a part of the NATO initiative to reassure member countries on the alliance's eastern flank.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has invited Sweden to help rebuild his country as he marked 1 month of the Russian military operation. Addressing the Swedish parliament through virtual link, Zelensky said the people of his country have not seen a destruction of this scale since World War II. He said a month of bombing similar to what world has seen in Syria. He added that 10 million people have been displaced. He called on Swedish companies and state to come rebuild the country. Zelensky, speaking through an interpreter, also raised an alarm about the possibility of Russia using nuclear and chemical weapons. His speech was broadcast live before members of the 349-seat Riksdagen, which gave him a standing ovation. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff on Thursday said North Korea test-fired at least one suspected ballistic missile towards the sea. The missile traveled 1,080 kilometers and reached a maximum altitude of over 6,200 kilometers. Japan's Prime Minister's office and Defense Ministry also said the launch possibly involved a ballistic missile, while its Coast Guard issued a warning for vessels passing nearby waters. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said it was an unforgivable recklessness. He resolutely condemned the act. It was North Korea's 12th round of weapons launches this year and came after it fired suspected artillery pieces into the sea on Sunday. The North Korea has also tested a variety of new missiles, including a purported hypersonic weapon and its first launch since 2017 of an intermediate-range missile potentially capable of reaching Guam, a key U.S. military hub in the Pacific.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrived in New Delhi on Thursday evening. This is the first high-level Chinese visit to India since the standoff in Ladakh 2 years ago. The Chinese Foreign Minister is expected to meet External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval on Friday. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India-Sri Lanka ties. In conversation are Anil Kumar Triguniyat, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, journalist.
As India and Sri Lanka are set to celebrate 75 years of their independence and the establishment of relations between them, plans are being made to suitably mark the occasion, as befitting those among the closest of neighbors in the region. Sri Lanka has, unfortunately, in recent months, been struggling with an acute economic downturn and comprising energy and power shortages. India, as a good neighbor, has put forward a helping hand, leading to a fresh impetus in bilateral relations. In fact, so far in 2022, India has extended $1.4 billion support to Sri Lanka through a $400 million RBI currency swap, deferral of a $0.5 billion loan, and another $500 million as a line of credit for the island nation to sustain its essential fuel and food, etc. imports. During the visit of Sri Lanka's Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa to New Delhi last week, India announced a $1 billion line of credit to Sri Lanka as part of its financial assistance and to help the island nation deal with its economic crisis. Ambassador Anil Trigunaya joins us this evening to guide us through the nuances of India's recent relations with its close neighbor. Can you please explain to us what happened to the country?
Well, I think that there are several factors. One of the biggest factors, I would say, has been the pandemic. And the pandemic has affected the hospitality industry and tourism a great deal. And Sri Lanka, being a beautiful island nation, depends significantly on the remittances the income due to tourism. Roughly about $4 billion a year. And that is something that has been basically denied to them due to that. It's only now that this opening has taken place. Secondly, as you know, a very large number of people who were there in the Gulf countries who used to remit, they came back. So that contributed to this. In addition, they have been also borrowing a great deal from China. And these borrowings eventually come up for payment. You have to repay your loans. And that has also added to their plight. Apart from the fiscal and foreign exchange crisis, the country had overspent, that is for sure, and has not adopted prudent fiscal policies according to their own central bank and other leaders. But at the same time, there is a cumulative impact which is taking place and is causing a situation where they are on the verge of sovereign debt defaults, basically. And therefore, they do not want to take the IMF loan, basically because it means that they'll have to reverse several policies. Exchange rate mechanisms will have to be tweaked. Rather than that, they prefer to go to two major countries, that is India and China. And that's where both the countries have tried to help because one single country is unable to do so. And India, as soon as they came and approached us in keeping with our neighborhood first policy and the fact, as you mentioned, is our closest maritime neighbor. And the historic civilizational links, India stood up for this. As such, we have been one of the largest providers of grants to the tune of about $570 million and over $3.5 billion before this. And what you have already mentioned, the kind of 4-point formula which India has extended, the loan $500 million for buying oil and fuel supplies, or for that matter, food supplies, medicines. During the pandemic, India has assisted. So overall, or very recently, when the finance minister was here, they signed a $1 billion line of credit for again helping them tide over this difficulty. Likewise, I think China has also provided them these windows. We have deferred the Asian Clearing Union. We were supposed to get that money. That has been also deferred. So India is trying to help as much as it can. But I think that overall, Sri Lanka will have to also work on its own finances, and hopefully with the change scenario now that is happening, they will be able to tide over this difficult time.
There's a strange anomaly here. Part of Sri Lanka's problems have stemmed from excessive borrowing from China, in fact, and they're part of the Belt and Road Initiative and have chosen to participate in all of these things. In fact, to the tune that the Hambantota port, they could not repay the amounts that were taken, and China sort of almost took it over by default. Now, having this kind of a background scenario, last year, in fact, relations with India became a little strained after the Eastern Colombo port, I think, was denied. Suddenly they withdrew the access that had been given to India to develop that part of the port. But now it seems that India has been more than steadfast in helping Sri Lanka, and ties seem to be coming back on board. Is that a correct kind of assessment that, having not managed their finances very well, they've fallen back on India, which essentially did a currency swap and helped them to prevent any default on their payment? Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, I think that is the correct assessment. Now many countries have gone through this kind of difficulties in the past. Even we were in 1991, as you know, launched economic reforms. So most countries go through this kind of thing for one reason. There was the oil crisis of the time, but now this is pandemic in which many countries have gone through this problem. So I think that when you're the most of the countries whose economies were very largely dependent on tourism and all this have really suffered a great deal. Apart from the kind of mismanagement and the overall, being over-ambitious due to political connections and Chinese debts that are huge, actually. It's about 10 to 12% of the total GDP, which is there, which is quite a big one.
Exactly.
And as you mentioned, that the China's policies are really grab it while you can types. And they are very much part of the BRI initiative, but they don't want to kill the goose. So that's why China is continuing to provide them assistance. India's policies have been very different. As you know, it is non-reciprocal policies. We don't expect much in return except their concern for our security. And that's one thing. And as far as Eastern Terminal was concerned, of course, there were reports that was because of Chinese influence and India and Japan, which were working together on that port. So this port was taken away. But then they have provided a Western, terminal to India, which Adani Group has got it now. It is being developed by them. So broadly, they have tried to make up for it. Secondly, then Trincomalee, the tank oil farms, which has been also given to India and, for storage facilities, for oil and petroleum products. And Sri Lanka is also being used significantly by our shipping companies because 70% of cargo is really transferred or exchanged in Colombo ports. So we have to continue to deal with them on that basis. So it's a mutual benefit as well from that perspective. So I think that our relationship with Sri Lanka is continuing to improve, and that is a very good thing. And now they are realizing also that Indian assistance is qualitatively different, both in intent and in outcomes.
India has been much more holistic in all of its approach. For example, when Mr. Rajapaksa met Prime Minister last week, Prime Minister spoke particularly about the central role that Sri Lanka occupies, not just in the neighborhood first policy, but also in the Sagar policy, the security and growth for all in the region. And the Buddhist circuits of tourism have been emphasized as a growth area, which can help Sri Lanka perhaps revive its economy somewhat.
Our relationship with Sri Lanka is historic, civilizational, is steeped into our religious DNA, I would say. Many people say that we have had connections of 2,500 years, but I think it's very, very old, much older than that. Of course, there have been difficulties in the relationship because of the Tamilian factor and what happened during that time and India's effort to assimilate or help the Sri Lankan government tide over these issues which were threatening them at that time. So that is very much there. Then people-to-people exchanges are very important, and you rightly mentioned that Prime Minister Modi spoke about the Buddhist circuit and connection and provided even $15 million for creating some kind of infrastructure. India also provides them no more than 4,000 scholarships every year. To Sri Lankans, and even the same kind of a treatment, like NEET and CET or whatever these exams are there, they are also, Sri Lankans are eligible for it. And as far as Sagarmala is concerned, some of the strategists would like to compete to see it in the Sagarmala versus the string of pearls strategy. So I think that when we talk of Sagar, we talk of growth for all. In our maritime security, obviously it's extremely important. But we also have to see, now of course, it's part of the BIMSTEC as well. And now they are going to host the BIMSTEC summit end of the month. So I think that our relationship with them is growing both bilaterally, in a regional, sub-regional, and in the international field. Even at the UNHRC this time, India, as you know, supported Sri Lanka. I see it from this point of view that all our neighbors, for that matter, are seeing India and China as the two giants. So they are between these two. So they are trying to smartly move on. And with India, they feel culturally close. So obviously, it is far more easier at the P2P level to understand each other's pain points. And I hope that relationships with most of our neighbors, and especially with Sri Lanka, will continue to grow.
Thank you very much indeed, Anil.
Thank you so much.
This is All India Radio, giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
The UN General Assembly, UNGA, has adopted a resolution on the humanitarian situation in Ukraine today, with 140 countries voting in favor and 5 against. A total of 38 countries, including India, abstained. Russia, Belarus, Eritrea, North Korea and Syria voted against it. The resolution deplores the humanitarian consequences of Russia's actions. Earlier India had abstained from voting on a similar resolution against Russia at UNGA. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal on Thursday said India ranks third among global ecosystems. Replying to the demands for grants of Commerce and Industry Ministry, Mr. Goyal informed Lok Sabha, the lower house of Parliament, that there are more than 65,000 startups registered with the ministry and lakhs who are yet to register. He stated 90 startups in India have attained unicorn status, that is, an overall valuation exceeding $1 billion. The minister said the Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-reliant India is not aimed at closing doors to India, but it is about endowing priority to goods that can be best manufactured in India and create a global competitiveness. The prestigious Wings India 2022 has been taken off at Begumpet Airport in Hyderabad in the southern state of Telangana. Union Civil Aviation Ministry and the FICCI are jointly organizing the biennial event with India at 75, New Horizon for Aviation Industry as the main theme. Business to business and business to government deliberations are underway among various stakeholders as the conference cum exhibition is providing a platform for the same. French aerospace major Airbus SE said in its latest India market forecast on Thursday. Meanwhile, French aerospace major Airbus has said that India will require over 2,200 aircrafts over the next 2 decades. Airbus official Brent McBratney said India will be global leader with 6.2% growth till year 2040.
India's Health and Family Welfare Minister Dr. Mansukh Mandavia has reaffirmed the government's commitment to make the country TB-free by 2025 by ensuring access to quality healthcare and advanced treatment. Inaugurating the Step Up to End TB World TB Day Summit in New Delhi on Thursday, Dr. Mandavia called for public participation in eliminating the evil of tuberculosis from India. He said collective efforts of the people will play a key role in eliminating TB much before the Sustainable Development Goal of 2030. Every year on 24th of March, the International Day for the Right to the Truth Concerning Gross Human Rights Violations and for the Dignity of Victims is observed. We have more in this report.
On 21st December 2010, the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 24th March as the International Day for the Right to the Truth Concerning Gross Human Rights Violations and for the Dignity of Victims. This annual observance pays tribute to the memory of Monsignor Oscar Arnolfo Romero, who was assassinated on 24th March 1980. He was actively engaged in denouncing violations of the human rights of the most vulnerable individuals in El Salvador. The purpose of the day is to honor the memory of victims of gross and systematic human rights violations and promote the importance of the right to truth and justice. The day also pays tribute to those who have devoted their lives to and those who lost their lives in the struggle to promote and protect human rights for all. Abhishek Mukhopadhyay for World News, All India Radio, Delhi.
India's Minister for Health and Family Welfare, Dr. Mansukh Mandavia, informed the Lok Sabha, the lower house of Parliament, that the number of seafarers have increased in the country from 94,000 in 2014 to 240,000 now. Intervening during the discussion, he said cruise tourism has also improved manifold. Before 2014, only 200 crews visited India, which has now grown to 2 lakh per annum. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Designate Yogi Adityanath will take oath on Friday in Lucknow in second time in a row. He has been elected as the leader of the UP BJP Legislative Party on Thursday. Talking to media after election as leader of the BJP Legislative Party, Mr. Yogi Adityanath thanked Prime Minister, Union Home Minister Amit Shah and the party for showing faith in him.
Indian Embassy in Argentina have introduced yoga in Argentine Federal Police. Ambassador Dinesh Bhatia and Juan C. Hernandez, Chief of Argentine Federal Police, jointly inaugurated the Yoga Capacitation Project for Physical and Mental Well-being of Police Officials on Wednesday. The 15th edition of Indian Premier League Tata IPL 2022 will begin on Saturday. There are 10 teams to compete for 4 playoff spots in this edition. BCCI added 2 new teams, Lucknow Super Giants and Gujarat Titans, for this season of IPL. A total of 74 T20 matches will be played. Defending champion Chennai Super Kings will take on Kolkata Knight Riders in the opening match on Saturday at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let us take a look at the press reports on China. News 18 writes that India on Wednesday slammed Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi for referring to Jammu and Kashmir during his speech at the opening ceremony of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Conference hosted by Pakistan. Calling it an uncalled reference, the Ministry of External Affairs said that the matters related to the Union territory are entirely the internal affairs of India, and other countries including China have no locus standi to comment on it. NDTV reports that India on Wednesday reiterated that Jammu and Kashmir is an internal matter and said it rejects the uncalled reference to it by the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi during his speech at a function in Pakistan. Let us take a look at what made the headlines in Nepal. The Kathmandu Post writes that Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deoba is all set to embark on a 3-day official visit to India starting April 1st. Political and diplomatic sources told the Post that Deoba has already received and accepted the invitation extended by his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi to visit the southern neighbour. The visit will take place immediately after Chinese Foreign Minister and State Councillor Wang Yi concludes his 3-day Nepal visit. Wang Yi is scheduled to visit Kathmandu on March 25th and return to China on March 27th.
Russia and Bangladesh are working out modalities to keep transactions and trade between the two countries uninterrupted, said Russian Ambassador to Bangladesh Alexander Mantiskia in Dhaka on Thursday, reports Daily Star. He said the two countries are considering different options including swap of national currencies and usage of third countries' banks. The development comes after the US imposed sanctions including on the SWIFT system following the Russia-Ukraine war on February 24th. A quick look at the headlines once again. India says reference made to New Delhi at OIC meet in Pakistan based on falsehoods and misrepresentation. Ministry of External Affairs says India will continue to partner with Arab countries in efforts to achieve regional peace, stability and prosperity. New Delhi once again calls for immediate cessation of violence to end Ukraine crisis, says there is no other way to resolve it other than diplomacy. NATO leaders agree to deploy 4 new battle groups to Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Bulgaria to counter Russian military operation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrives in New Delhi, likely to hold talks with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on Friday. North Korea test-fires suspected ballistic missile. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida terms it as unforgivable recklessness. India ranks 3rd among global ecosystems, says Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. 90 startups in India attain unicorn status. And in cricket, 15th edition of Indian Premier League Tata IPL 2022 to begin on Saturday. And now before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from South Africa.
Vaishnav Jan do tene kahiye je peed parai jane re पर दुख के उपकार करे तो ये मन अभिमान नाने रे सकल लोक मान सहुने बंधे निंदा न करे.
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.